let me see what are the categories of share capital. This is basically something that you need to know when you are studying the chapter issue of shares. So we have something that is called as the authorized capital, issued capital, subscribed capital, called up capital, paid up capital, reserved capital, and uncalled capital. These are the categories of share capital that we have. So when we talk about authorized capital, this capital is the registered capital, or I can say this is the nominal capital. When I talk about authorized capital, it means the maximum number of shares or the maximum share capital which a company is authorized to issue in my lifetime of the company. I cannot issue more shares than what I registered myself with. So that is called the authorized share capital. I would say this is the maximum number of shares which I can issue during my lifetime. It is also called as the registered share capital, or I would say this is also called as the nominal share capital. I will proceed to issued share capital. Say, for example, I am authorized to issue 100,000 as my share capital, but the amount of capital that I actually put in the market, I launch in the market, I actually issue to the public is called the issued share capital. I may be authorized to issue 100,000 crores for share capital, but the amount that I actually sell to the public or I offer to the public to sell is called the issued share capital. So maybe I have issued only 10 crores of capital. So that becomes the issued capital. It is a part of authorized capital which I actually issue to the public. Now, when we talk about subscribed capital, I can issue any amount of money and I can tell people that I am a public limited company or I'm a private limited company and I'm looking for funds to start my business. But there may not be everyone who will lay their trust in me. Okay, so what I issue can never be the capital. What I issue can never be the capital because I am not sure how many people would buy my shares. So the number of people who actually buy my share, or I could say the number of people who actually subscribe to my share becomes the subscribed capital. So what I issue from that, the people who buy it, so it is a part of issued capital which has been actually subscribed by the public, or we can say which has been actually bought by the public. So what is subscribed capital? Subscribed capital is that part of my issued capital which has been actually bought by the public. Now let's take about the called up capital. So maybe I say that I have authority to issue 100,000 crores of share capital, but I actually offer in the market right now only 10 crores. But the people buy only 100,000 shares from me. Only 100,000 shares of me, which has a face value of rupees 10, or I could say which has a face value of $10. So subscribed capital would be the amount of shares which the public has actually bought from me. Now my duty comes. Now I have to start calling for money from the public. The amount of money that I can start calling from the public is called the called up capital. So whatever I call will always become my capital. I am repeating, whatever I call from people will become my capital. What I do not call for, what I do not ask them to pay, will never become a part of my capital. Now, there are some SEBI guidelines that you need to follow when you are calling for money from the public. The face value of your shares is rupees 10. The first thing that you can do is you can ask for application money from the public, and you should note that the application money should not exceed 25% of your face value. That means if my face value of the share is 10, my application money cannot be, cannot be less than 25% of the face value. So the application money cannot be less than 2.5 per share. You can call for more money, but it should not be less than 2.5. Similarly, when you're calling for the second time, again, after application money, you call for allotment. First, then the first time you call is called the first call. Then the next time you call is called the second call. So whenever you are calling for any money from the public, it should not be less than 25% of the face value. That means whatever money you're calling for should be more than 25%, should be at least 2.5 or more than it. Another thing which the SEBI tells you, that whenever you start calling, the gap between your two calls should be at least 1 month. You cannot call every 5 days, every 10 days that you come and pay. So the gap between two calls should be at least 1 month. Now let us talk about the called up capital. We will go and talk about this in detail later. So when I ask money from the public, for the people who have subscribed to my shares, I tell them that you can now come and pay me. You can now come and pay me. Whatever I call will become my capital. Now, what is called up capital? So when I talk about called up capital, it is what the company has asked the shareholders to pay. Called up capital is a part of subscribed capital, which I ask my shareholders to pay. Uncalled capital is a part of subscribed capital which has not yet been called up, which has not yet been called up. Called up capital, what the company has asked the shareholders to pay, it is a part of subscribed capital. Uncalled capital is also a part of subscribed capital, which I have not yet called up. Say, for example, the face value of my share is 10. The company has called up only rupees 7 per share. In that scenario, the called up capital is 7 per share, and the remaining 3 may be collected or may be called as and when needed. But you should remember one part in this is that the gap between your calls should not be less than 1 month. What is reserve capital? When you call up some money from your shareholders, that money you will start using in your company. But sometimes a company, what does it do? Whatever portion it calls up, it keeps aside some money for winding up. So reserve capital is that portion, it is that part of your called up capital which has been, it is that portion of your uncalled capital which you will call only when you're winding up your company. So what is reserve capital? It is that portion of your share capital that you will call only when you're winding up the company. Now, when you're talking about the paid up capital, I may here in this scenario, I have called up $7 or rupees 7 per share, but the amount which they actually pay me, the amount that I actually receive from my shareholders is called the paid up capital. I just messed up a little reserve capital. I said reserve capital is a part of called up. It is not a part of called up. It is a part of uncalled capital, which I will call from my shareholders only when I am supposed to wind up the company. I keep that part as reserved. Now, so these are the various categories of share capital. So now if we see, let's look at the structure of it. Authorized share capital is the maximum amount of capital that we are allowed to issue during our lifetime. It is that capital with which we register ourselves. It is also called as a nominal capital. The amount that you actually offer to the public is issued, and what you don't offer to the public is unissued. So, issued capital is a part of authorized capital. What the public actually buy from us is called the subscribed capital. So subscribed capital is a part of issued capital. What we call up from the public and they pay is called subscribed and fully paid up. And if they have not paid, so it will be subscribed but not fully paid up capital. Let's look at one example. So show how the share capital will be shown in the balance sheet. New Delhi has registered its capital as 40,000 divided into 4,000 shares of 10 each. So the authorized share capital will be, I have registered my capital. If I say I have registered my capital, so that means this is the authorized share capital of 400 shares of rupees 10 each and it becomes 40 lakh. The company had offered to the public for subscription of 200,000 shares of 10 each. Okay, so the what you offer to the public for subscription, it becomes your issued capital. So your issued capital is 200 shares of 10 each. Now, how are you supposed to receive this money? You are receiving rupees 2 on application, 3 on allotment, 3 on the first call, and balance on the final call. So, how you're going to receive it? 2 on application, 3 on allotment, 3 on first call, 3, 6, 7, 8, and the balance on the final call. The company has received applications for 2,50,000 shares, but since I have issued only 200,000 shares, I can allot only 200,000 shares. So if I have received extra application, I will have to return the money back. So whatever is issued, the fully will be subscribed. So company finalized allotment for 200,000 shares and it rejected 50,000 shares. The company did not make the final call. So they have not made the final call. So the company has called up 3, 6, 7, 8. The company has called up rupees 8. That means they have not called up full money. They have not called up full money. So it will be subscribed but not fully paid up. How many people have subscribed? 200,000 shares of rupees 10 each. Rupees 8 is called up. So whatever I call will become my capital. I am repeating again. Whatever I call will become my capital. I have called it 8. So 8 will become my capital. So 8 into 200,000. So my capital will become 16 lakh. What I receive will be paid up. What I receive will be paid up. And what I do not receive will become the calls in arrears. So what is my calls in arrears? The company received all amount except on 2000 shares where call money has not been received. So rupees 2 was an application, rupees 3 was an allotment, and rupees 3 again was your first call. So you have not received the call money. I have not received the call money for how many shares? I have not received call money for 2000 shares. That means 2000 into the first call. That means 6000 is not received. This is the first call money that I have not received. 6000 is not received, so this becomes my calls in arrears. So from my subscribed and not fully paid up, I will remove 6000. So this will become my capital that is being paid up. Please remember, you will create capital only of that amount that you have called up. I am repeating again and again, you will create capital of only that amount that you have called up.